Thank you very much. My name is Abraham Mariech, a third year PhD student at the University of Sheffield. Uh, I'm here ready to make a presentation about a working paper that is coming out of my PhD project. So I'll just move on straight to sharing my slides so that we can go through the discussion together. So I'll just be sharing my slide in a moment. So yes, the title of the paper is Housing Experiences of People with Disabilities in Rapidly Changing Informal Settlements of Eldoret, Kenya. Just moving on straight, because of time, straight to the introduction. Um, Basically, I'm looking at three issues here: disability, vis-a-vis informality within the context of a small and medium-sized city, that is Eldoret, which is fastest growing city in Kenya. Just a quick overview about the background of all these issues. You find that disabilities or PwDs rather form the majority of marginalized communities globally. And on the other side, the majority of people living in cities, especially in the global south, more than 60%, in most cities live in informal settlements. So I'm bringing these two very critical geographies together and looking at it through a nexus thinking that is overlaying on top of each other, using both lenses so that, I can be able to bring out the dynamics that when these two concepts or rather issues convert, what comes out of it. So just moving on from that quick introduction is just to state the objective and the research question. The objective basically is to explore the relationship between disability and informality in a fast-growing city. Then the research question is, how do people with disabilities adopt and negotiate the various housing conditions within urban informal settlements? To the next slide, which is basically an overview of the theoretical background. The main theoretical underpinning about this paper is CDT, critical disability theory. Critical disability theory is rather a new set of theorizing disability, which has just emanated in the last decade, the last couple of years, and it builds some of the key elements about it. It's one, it builds on the social model of disability, which was a major milestone within the disability landscape, in that it reversed the medicalization or individualistic theorization, which was held by the previous models, that is the charity and the medical model, just to name a few. And the other key element is that it enhanced the alliance between it and the various other critical theories, such as queer, feminism, and post-colonial theory. And so many other issues about capitalism, political economy, and activism are all enshrined, or rather all form the basis of, or rather premise CDT, which is critical disability theory. So that is the core theoretical underpinning that I'm using to advance or communicate experiences of PwDs within the setup of a secondary city, Eldoret. So the second secondary theory that I'm adopting is intersectionality, which basically recognizes all these social categories within any society, that in race, class, gender, quality, ethnicity, which all play into the discussion when we look at disability, for that matter. So that's just an overview of theory that I'll be adopting in my work. Moving on straight to how the whole research is conducted, basically methodology. Just to highlight is this research is purely qualitative, and I adopted a case study strategy using instrumental cases, using three informal settlements, that is Langas, Munyaka, and Boma Turkana, using interviews, observation, transect walks, and document reviews. to mention that interviews were the primary source of data, complemented by the other three. The main data analysis mechanism or thematic analysis that is using coding and theming. That is just an overview of how the research was conducted. You can see there are quite a number of images there that illustrate how I was interacting with the participants, the various participants. Just to move on straight to the findings, I realized that there are quite a number of categories, typologies of housing that PwDs occupied within the informal settlements in Eldoret. One of them is the low-lying rental housing. Secondly is caretaker borrowed housing. High-rise, thirdly is the high-rise rental, which were very few. And because of the context of, in itself, a small city, high-rise buildings were quite few. So most of occupants or other PwD urban settlers or other PwD inhabitants within the city were occupied, were living in low-lying rental housing. So the other one was owner occupancy. You find that within all these typologies, the rental housing was least desirable for PwDs, while owner occupied, which had more room for maneuver in terms of reorienting spaces and all that, that was the most preferred, but had the least number of PwDs who like took up such kind of housing within that context. So just to move on, we find that and to the challenges, which is basically the core, or rather the main the main discussion about this whole paper. We find that there were a number of challenges that PwDs experienced, but overall, you find that the most housing experience, or as most housing conditions, actually worsened or exacerbated the disability conditions of persons with disability. So the very first one was insecure tenure, and in insecure tenure, you find that insecure tenure led to evictions, which is very rampant in the Kenyan situation of informality. In fact, in one of the informal settlements, that is Turkana, the whole of it was a squatter settlement. So they were living in fear of eviction. Anytime they felt eviction was right, as illustrated in that quote. and evictions happened in quite a number of ways. One was when PwDs were getting evicted from government land. Secondly was when PwDs get evicted from rented private premises. The second challenge was on size, spatial issues, the spatial issue within the context of the home, which was very key and central to PwD's own experience. We find that confinement, privacy, and noise levels were all an issue for persons living with disabilities. For instance, there was a quote from a disabled a lady with a woman with a disabled child about how she was trying to illustrate how they were living in a very small and confined house, which could not didn't augur well with the experience of a disabled child. Just to move on, thirdly is affordability and quality. All these characteristics go hand in hand. You find that if someone is not able to afford particular housing, find that quality is compromised, and preference in itself is restricted. The other one was an issue about homelessness and houselessness, but many PwDs were homeless and houseless. They didn't have any sort of shelter and accommodation, so they would sleep on the streets, and in that they would end up begging and be exposed to other vulnerable acts like rape and violence and all that. And lastly was access. I realized that access was a big issue. Though it's a universal problem or barrier, it did affect PwDs in Eldoret in so many ways. just because of time, to move on, what are some of the possible intervention opportunities that we could, within the context of Kenya, that can be advocated by both scholars or other theorists and practitioners? One is advocacy, two is policy, and three is within the architecture of polity or governance, the necessity of devolution. So on advocacy, you find that I realize that even the practitioners, rather the housing professionals within the built environment themselves, they didn't have so much knowledge about disability. So advocating and sensitizing the both PwD communities and professionals and even developers about disability issues was key. Policy was another very important opportunity that, because in as much as we had so many disability policies, in a way, implementation was basically the element in the room. So many policies are not getting implemented. At the same time, within the context of the local governance, some of the policies were not tailored to particular contexts. Just because of time, just to conclude, I found that disability housing is a significant issue that both scholars and practitioners have to come together to within the context of CDT to understand all that. Just to finalize, those are the questions. How can the Global South, I'm just posing two questions. How can the Global South disability scholarship learn and unlearn from Western theories so that the voices of PwDs can be enhanced? And then lastly, what lessons can secondary cities take from larger cities on disability theory and practice with the Global South region? Thank you for listening. And that is all I had for the presentation.